There's a good reason why people close their curtains at night in the Appalachian Mountains. There are things in those woods that are terrifying. And one of those things happened to be the Appalachian Wendigo. Now, there was this man named Jim. Jim decided one day that he was going to sell everything he had and buy some acreage of land in the Appalachian Mountains and start this homestead. So Jim finds this good piece of land and he moves there, builds a cabin and several structures. And for a year, his life was amazing. He said one day, though, he gets a knock on his cabin door. And he said he opens the door. On the other side of the door was this older gentleman. And he said the gentleman started speaking. He said, "Hey, my name is Fox. I live not too far from here. And I wanted to check on you because I know you're all alone out here. And things can happen to people who are alone in the woods." And Jim was kind of like, why is this guy saying all this and stuff? So he said the guy continued to talk to him, but all he could think about was the fact that this guy Fox looked exactly like his father, who had passed away when he was a young boy. And he said it was just very, very eerie. It was like talking to his father. So he said, finally, the guy said, "You be safe out here. I'll see you later." And he said the way he said it was kind of creepy. So he said this guy, Fox, he just walked away and took off into the woods and he never seen him again. A couple months after this, he said, one night he was asleep in his bedroom and he awakes to this sound of scratching. And he said the scratching sounds were coming from his window. And he said when he looked over in the direction towards his window, he sees the shadow appear and it's almost in the shape of a person. And he said the shadow just moved across the wall all the way around him to the other side of his bed. And he said the next thing he knows, something was holding him down. He could not move and he was panicking and freaking out. And then he said, all of a sudden, it was gone. And he got up and he said, that must have just been a really crazy dream. So he said, this kept happening to him. He kept having this, what he thought at the time was a dream. Well, one day he said he was out on his land setting up some traps. And he said he happened to notice in the snow, there was all of this weird movement. And he said, what is that in the snow? So he goes a little closer, he grabs a tree branch and he moves the snow over. And he said out popped several rats. And he said that's when he realized these rats were eating a deer carcass. And he said it was just so sickening that he had to start vomiting. And he said as he was bent over vomiting into the snow, he looks up and there is the guy Fox. And he said the guy was just standing there staring at him. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing out here on my property?" And he said Fox looked at him and said, "You seen the deer?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "You see, a lot of weird things happen in these woods." And then he said he turned and just walked away. So he said, that was like a really weird encounter. Like, did he have something to do with that deer or whatever? So he said, next couple of days, he really, really kept having these nightmares where he would see the shadowy thing in his room. And then he said this one particular night, he was sitting by the fireplace and he was just contemplating life. And he said, all of a sudden, the next thing he knows, he just stood up. He started walking towards the door. He opened the front door of the cabin and he starts walking out into the woods. And he said it was weird. It was like he knew what he was doing, but he couldn't control it. And something was just drawing him into the woods deeper and deeper. So he said finally he stops and he's just surrounded by trees. It's completely dark. And he said the next thing he knows, he hears his father's voice say, "Son, come here. It's your father." And he said out of the shadows steps that guy Fox again. And he said, "It's me. I'm your father. Come here. Come give your father a hug." And Jim's just kind of like, well, "No, you're not my father. My father's not here anymore." And he's like, "No, I am your father. Like, I've been here the whole time. Come give me a hug." And he said he just like didn't trust this guy. He thought he was crazy. And he said all of a sudden, this guy's skin began to peel off. And he said that's when he could see this wasn't his father. This wasn't a man. This was this pale white skinny creature with sharp teeth, sharp claws, and these bright yellow eyes. And he said this thing said to him, "I said, come here now." And the voice had changed. So he said next thing he knows, like he was able to get awareness again. And like he was aware of his situation where he was at. He turns and he just takes off running. He gets back to his cabin, he jumps in his truck, and he leaves his cabin and just abandons it. And he said after a couple of weeks, he didn't know what to do. So he went to this Native American man in town that everyone said was a medicine man. And he told him like what had happened and stuff. And he said, this Native American man said to him, what you seen was the Wendigo, what my people call the Wendigo. And he said, he has chosen you. And the reason he hasn't taken you yet is because he wants you to be as afraid as possible, because to them, the more fear you have, the better you taste to them. And he will continue to follow you and, harass you until he finally gets you afraid enough that he will take you. So Jim said he decided to sell the cabin and he never went back there again. And he said still to this day, he can hear scratching sometimes at his window and he will see the shadowy figure in his room at night.
I'm gonna tell another weird story of something that happened when I lived in Appalachia. Don't give me shit about how I pronounce the fucking name. The Appalachian Mountains run through a billion states with different dialects, so shut the fuck up. I feel like it's just as justifiable to call it the Appalachian Mountains as Appalachian. It doesn't matter what you say, potato, potato. But anyways, back to the story. I lived in Jasper, Georgia. Inside of Jasper, Georgia, there's a small little town called Tate, Georgia, where they produce marble. There's like all these marble factories all around where I lived, and around the marble factories, it's like coated in this white dust. It was kind of weird. I'm going to tell a story about Tate, Georgia today. So I had a friend who, their whole family lived on a mountain in Tate, Georgia. Like, it would be like my friend's house, their family next door, more family members next door, more family members across the street. Like, they ran the fucking block type shit. She was my best friend growing up, and she's still one of my really good friends to this day. She's awesome. But for the sake of this story, I'm going to call her Rachel. So across the street from Rachel's family's house, there's this one house that has like all this kudzu in the backyard. And her mom always told us, don't go play in the kudzu, don't go over there. Because the person who lived at that house before unalived themselves, and it was just bad vibes over there. So one day, we went over there and we were just like fucking around in the backyard. Just like walking through the kudzu and like looking through the windows of the house and stuff. And we just kind of felt this bad energy. So we ended up just going back to Rachel's mom's house. So I don't know. I always knew like that place was kind of bad vibes. But anyways, fast forward, I'm in college. This is probably like 5 or 6 years later. Basically, Rachel and I are living together while I'm going to college in this town called Kennesaw, Georgia. I went to KSU. And Rachel's mom calls us and tells us this really scary story. She said that she had a dream that she walked to one of the family members' houses down the street. And sorry, I just saw my neighbor in the back and it kind of scared me. But she said she had a dream that she walked to one of her neighbor's houses, her family member. And she said in the dream there was this dude in a tall tuxedo, like a tall dude in a tuxedo with no face following her. And she said it freaked her out so bad that she started running in the dream. And then all of a sudden the dude with no face was in front of her. And she said he was just really close to her, and it scared her so bad that she woke up. So she called us and basically told us about this weird dream she had, and she said it was the most vivid dream ever, and it was just all sorts of weird. And so, yeah, I don't know. And she would call us pretty often, so that's not, like, unusual. We were like, damn, sorry about your dream, that sucks. I hope you don't have a bad dream tomorrow. And so then, the next day, she called us again, freaking the fuck out. So basically, when she called us, she said, so her and her boyfriend were having like a cookout at their house, and her boyfriend has 2 young boy children. And while they were cooking, the 2 boys wandered off to go play, and they went back in the kudzu patch behind that weird house. And all of a sudden, they were gone for like 15 minutes or so. And then they hear these two boys screaming and sprinting back to Rachel's mom's house. And basically, the two boys say that they were playing in the kudzu and they turned around because they heard something. And they saw a tall dude in a tuxedo with, like, no face. And so, yeah. Rachel's mom was freaking the fuck out and was, like, crying on the phone with us. And it was really fucking scary. I don't know what the fuck to make of this story. It's just something that, like, I don't know. It happened. She told us about it. And then I was like, Slender Man? What the fuck? So, yeah. A lot of weird stuff happened growing up in Jasper. Specifically around the area I lived in for some reason. I don't know if, like, I don't know. I don't know what the fuck is in the water in this area, but yeah, a lot of weird stuff happened. That was one of the scarier stories, just because, I don't know, there's no explanation for that. And it's weird that Rachel's mom saw that person or that thing in her dream the night before. So, if you made it till the end of the story, shout out to you. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will post more stories. Bye, y'all.
Here's an Appalachian horror story for you. I gotta warn you, if you're gonna be alone tonight or have to go walk outside in the dark for any reason, do not watch this one, because this one is a true story. It's just the supernatural element that's up for debate. And it's the story of Casey Hathaway, the 3-year-old boy who went missing from his North Carolina grandparents' home in the Appalachian Mountains. And what just dumbfounds people is how he survived. He was missing for 3 days, and he was in a pajama onesie. This is his picture of when they found him, okay? Now, if you notice, there's no mud on the bottom of his feet. Yet, right after he went missing, it rained heavily. In fact, so much that there was so much mud that the rescuers could not navigate the woods hardly at all. Now, this is where it gets a supernatural twist. After he was found, for 3 days being missing, with a few minor scratches, but he was fed and he had been drinking because he was not dehydrated. After he was found, they said, "How did you survive?" And he goes to tell the tale of the fuzzy people that saved him. Not fuzzy like Harry. He says fuzzy like TV static. Okay? He said they kept him company. They talked to him, though he couldn't understand them. They fed him. They watered him. Twig snapping. They fed him. They watered him. They gave him shelter. And he was found just a quarter-mile away from his home after rescuers had essentially given up and assumed that he could only be dead, because while he was missing, it was below zero. During the day, when it was above freezing, it was raining. So when it was above freezing, it was raining. So then he would have gotten hypothermia after being soaking wet. And when they found him, he was barely wet at all. Like, it had shown no signs, essentially, that he had been in these elements for 3 days. They didn't think it was possible for a grown man to survive these conditions, let alone a child that was just wearing pajamas. No cold weather gear, no nothing. His family will not recount the story the same way. They say that he said it was a bear. And the first responders are like, no, he said it was a fuzzy person. Fuzzy people took care of him. And they're like, no, he says it's a bear. And to this day, the family recounts the story as he talks about there being a bear. So guess what? During this search, they had hunters, trappers, because they thought, maybe it was an animal. There's mountain lions in that area. There's bears in that area. No bear scat was ever found. No bear dens were ever found. And most importantly, remember how muddy it was? There was no bear footprints found. What's even stranger is Casey, the little boy, his footprints were not found either. He was just found tangled up in a thorn bush a quarter-mile away from where he went missing. The rescuers and his personal family had searched that exact area literally hundreds of times. Like, thousands of people were out here. They combed that area a million times. And he was so close to his home. How they found him is no one saw him. They could just hear him. He was like, hey, somebody come get me. And that's where he said the fuzzy people left him, was in this thorn bush. And you can see on that picture, if you go back, I'll put it up here again. You can see his little toe on the onesie is tore up, indicating that, yeah, he was stuck in that thorn bush. But why wasn't he muddy? If you look at photos of the rescuers, they were talking about, it was like knee-deep mud they're sloshing around in. They were talking about it was the worst, sloshiest conditions ever. Yet this little boy that's been out here for 3 days. It looks like somebody's been carrying him the whole time. Kind of like how a big ape would carry their young. Kind of like how a Bigfoot would carry somebody. That's where the conspiracy theories go, is that this was a Bigfoot that abducted him or took care of him when he did wander away, because his grandma describes him as vanishing into thin air. She took her eyes off of him for 2 minutes, boom, he's gone. Now, we know how kids are, but the whole family immediately went searching for him. And even if he was in a full dead sprint, he shouldn't have been able to get that far, right? Now, a lot of people want to say Bigfoot photographs are always fake or they're always blurry. Well, if we listen to Casey Hathaway here, what if Bigfoot are just fuzzy? Like they're not blurry in the photos because somebody's a bad photographer. What if that's just the way they appear? Because if you look at Native American folklore, they talk about how Bigfoot is not a creature of our plane of existence. He can walk into our realm and out of our realm. So light wouldn't apply to him the same way if he's coming in and out, phasing in and out. And that would also explain why this little boy, he might have not even been in our plane of existence anymore. He might have been back to wherever Bigfoot land is, or what that area, the Appalachian area, call the Fae. If you want to look into the Fae story of this, the theory of this, Fae are often known for luring children. That is one of the big things they talk about with the Fae. They talk about people seeing that, like, they get their name called, or there's like this luring music, or they might even see another child in the woods motioning for them to come here, and it lures them. And the Fae have been described notoriously as being creatures of light, or being like fuzzy or blurry, because, you know, they're not quite of our realm, so you can't see them the way you would see like an actual regular physical object. Who knows? What we do know is that a little boy survived odds that no one should have been able to survive, with relatively no repercussions at all. And he himself talks about the fuzzy people, okay? And the doctors all agree somebody had to give him food and water. So then that goes back to a lot of people saying, oh, what if he was abducted? What if this or that? Where's the footprints? The rescuer's footprints could be seen everywhere. But somehow this boy, it was like he just pooped into the thorn bush. There is no tracks for him leading to the thorn bush. There's only the tracks leading away from the thorn bush after he was found and discovered. Almost like he was dropped from the sky or dropped from a tree. Once again, the way a great ape would drop you out of a tree. So the next time you're walking in the Appalachian woods, just remember, most likely you're not walking alone.
Go ahead and pour your tea, because tonight's story starts in the Appalachian Mountains at summer camp and ends with something smiling in the window. So grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary story that happened in the Appalachian Mountains, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. Always good tea. This story comes from Katie. Growing up here, I always thought that the things people warned you about could only come out at night. I have since learned that is not the case. It doesn't matter what time of day it is, the creatures that lurk in the forest are always watching. This story happened when I was 15. My parents signed me up to go to this church camp for a week in the summer. I really didn't want to go, but I found out one of my friends from school was going, so I figured it wouldn't be bad. Erin and I didn't really hang out all the time. We just knew each other from a few classes, and we would talk here and there, so I considered her to be a friend. Well, the time came for the summer camp, and we were told to meet in the church parking lot at 8 a.m., and a bus would take us to the camp. I showed up and immediately saw Erin standing there by herself. I walk over to her and try to make small talk, and after a few minutes we were told to load onto the bus so we could leave. The camp was only an hour away, which felt like a quick drive since Erin and I talked the whole way. We arrived and they started separating the girls and boys and showing us where we would be sleeping. The cabins were fairly nice. I mean, for it being a cabin in the woods used for a kid's summer program, they were in decent shape. Erin and I got a bunk bed off the corner of the room next to the window. The one thing about this place was it didn't have air conditioning. They had these ceiling fans that did work, so that was a plus, but we wanted to be by the window in case we needed to lift it if we got hot. And you don't have to tell me not to open the window at night, because after what happened to me and Erin, I won't ever do it again. The first day and night were fine. We went out and played games and swam in the lake and then finished up the day by the fire. We slept fine, and in the morning we got dressed and headed out to get breakfast. While we were all eating, the pastor told us what we would be doing that day. He told us we would be going on a nature walk, and let's chalk this up to what it actually was. We went hiking. It was so hot that day and Erin and I were falling behind, so we ended up at the back of the group. We were trying our best to keep up with the rest of the group, but Erin stopped to drink her water and catch her breath. I stopped with her because I didn't want her to be by herself. We only stopped for about 2 minutes, but the group was no longer in sight. I told Erin we needed to start catching up with them or we would get left behind. She agreed, and as she bent down putting her water bottle in her drawstring bag, we heard something like a branch snap in the woods beside us. Erin looked a little startled, but I told her it was probably a deer or something and that we should go. We jogged down the trail and finally caught up to the group, and I kept looking over at Erin to make sure she was okay, but I could tell that she felt really uncomfortable. We get to a stopping point and the pastor tells us to pair up because we were doing a scavenger hunt. Of course, Erin and I paired up and the pastor hands us a list of items we need to get. He set a timer for 15 minutes and told us not to go too far, and when we got our items to meet back there so we could see who won. The list was random things like 1 rock, 2 pine cones, 3 big leaves, so on and so forth. Erin and I split off from the group. I was looking on the ground for the items on the list when I heard what sounded like crying and sniffling. I turn around and look at Erin, and she is actively sobbing. I walk over to her and put my hand on her shoulder and ask her what's wrong. She told me that she could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. I asked her what she meant, and she said she didn't know, that she just felt like something was wrong and that she felt like something was watching her. I asked her if she wanted to head back to the cabin, and she said yes. I went and found one of the chaperones, and they took Erin back to the cabin. I stayed with the group, and after the scavenger hunt, we finished our nature walk and got back to the camp. After dinner, we were supposed to roast marshmallows, so I went to the cabin to see if Erin wanted to come out there. When I go in there, I didn't see her in her bed. The window was open, and when I looked outside, I could see her standing by the lake. I walked down there and I asked her if she was okay, but she didn't respond to me. I got closer and I touched her shoulder and said, "Hey, are you okay?" But when I touched her shoulder, she felt really cold. Without turning her head, she said she was fine. I asked if she wanted to come and roast marshmallows, and she just said no. I thought maybe she wanted to be by herself, so I walked back up to the cabin to go grab her a jacket because she felt so cold. As soon as I opened the door to the cabin, I can see Erin laying in bed. I got so freaked out, I ran over to the window and looked outside and did not see anyone standing down there at the lake. There was no possible way she was down there, then back in the cabin that quickly without me seeing her go past me. At that point, I thought I was losing my mind. I looked at Erin and said, "Were you just down at the lake?" She said, "No, I was in the bathroom." I told her I just saw her down at the lake, and when I touched her shoulder, she felt really cold, so I come up here to get her a jacket, but she's sitting right here. Erin looked very frightened, which matched my expressions exactly. I decided to stay in there with her because I didn't want to be out there with whatever I just saw. I sat on the bed next to her, and we just talked about what it could have possibly been that I saw, but of course we didn't have an explanation. After a while, the rest of the girls started to come in and get ready for bed. I climbed up on the top bunk above Erin, and the girl that was in the bed next to us closed the window before she got into bed. I eventually fell asleep, but in the middle of the night, I had to get up to go to the bathroom. I was only in there for a few minutes, and when I came out, I noticed that the window next to our bed was open. But everyone in that room was sound asleep, so I figured Erin or the girl in the bed next to us had opened it. But after what I saw earlier that night, I closed the window. I climbed back up on top of the bunk and turned facing the wall. As soon as I covered myself up, I heard what sounded like the window sliding open. I roll over and look down, and I will never forget what I saw. I see Erin standing outside of the cabin pushing the window up to open it. But that was not Erin, because I tilted over the side and looked underneath my bed and saw Erin sleeping below me. I looked back at the window, and the thing pretending to be Erin was standing there, staring at me and smiling. I then started to hear crying from below me. The thing outside the window looked over at Erin and reached in through the window to try and grab her. Erin started screaming, which woke everyone in the cabin up, and the thing outside ran off. I jumped down from the top bunk, slammed the window shut and locked it, and got in Erin's bed with her, hugging her. The chaperones come over to ask what was going on, and we told them exactly what we saw because Erin saw it too. Of course, they didn't believe us, and they had us call our parents to come pick us up in the middle of the night. Which honestly, there was no complaint from us because we knew what we saw, and it was absolutely terrifying, and we didn't want to spend one more night there with whatever that was. Erin and her family ended up moving that summer, and I've not gotten to talk to her since that night. As I've gotten older, I've done some research on what it was that we saw, and the best answer I can come up with is a mimic. I remember this so vividly, even though it happened 20 years ago. I will absolutely never forget how much that thing resembled Aaron and how terrified I was after that night. But I can only imagine how scared Aaron was seeing something that looked just like her. I wholeheartedly believe what they saw was a mimic because it not only looked like her, but it sounded just like her too. And what's even more terrifying is that Aaron felt like something was watching her while they were in the woods hiking. So there's no telling how long that thing was actually following her, trying to imitate what she looked like and sounded like. I have full body chills because that is absolutely terrifying that something not only looked and sounded like her, but tried to grab her through the window. That is actually terrifying. You guys let me know in the comments if you think it's something different than a mimic, but after everything that I read, I believe it was a mimic. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, it does not have to be about the Appalachian Mountains. It can be any scary story that you have. If you want to send it to me, you can email me, which the email will be right here on the screen, or I'll also put it in the caption of this video. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I love you, and I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Let's read another scary story. This one was sent in by Alea. I live about 2 hours away from the Appalachian Mountains. My grandma, on the other hand, lives in them. I go to my grandma's house every weekend with my cousins to visit. My youngest cousin Henry and I love going into the woods at night to explore. At the time, we were 9 and 12 years old. It was around 8 to 10 p.m. on the night this happened. We were alone deep in the woods, with no houses or anything nearby. All we had was my BB gun and 2 flashlights. We were about half a mile away from my grandma's house, exploring woods we knew very well. Then, I heard what sounded like my oldest cousin calling for us. I turned to look at Henry, and he had the most horrified look on his face. "Did you hear that?" I asked. He just nodded. I started thinking about how there was no way we would have been able to hear my cousin if we were nearly a mile away from the house. We tried to shake it off as our imagination. About 20 minutes later, we saw bright green lights straight ahead in the woods. Almost like headlights, but too close together to actually be headlights. My cousin suggested that maybe it was my grandma and my cousin searching for us in her car, but she had a truck and the headlights wouldn't be that close together. We walked about 30 feet toward the lights when we realized it was in fact a car, just not my grandma's. My cousin suddenly started running back toward the house without telling me. When I turned around to talk to him, he was gone and I was all alone. I started running too until I suddenly heard Henry scream. I yelled his name and he came running up behind me with the most terrified look on his face. What happened?" I asked him. He told me he saw a tall, lengthy, gray creature with the same colored eyes as the headlights hiding behind a tree. But when it noticed him, it started chasing him. I had never believed in things like flesh pedestrians, ghosts, mimics, or the living dead until we got back to my grandma's house and explained what happened. She told us she had lived there since she was 8 years old and that she and her brother used to do the same thing my cousin and I did, explore the woods at night. She explained that she has always been convinced there's something out in the mountains waiting for the right moment to do something to her or one of us, because something chased her once too. Now I'm really interested in the paranormal and I still go to my grandma's house every weekend, partly because I want to find out more about what that creature could have been. You know, I think we all know what type of creature this is. I don't think I even have to say it. It's definitely either a flesh pedestrian or a mimic trying to lure you to danger. You know I always love stories about the Appalachian Mountains, so thank you so much, Alea, for sending this one in. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can. And I will see you in the next one.
Sometimes places don't seem haunted during the day, but when it gets dark, the things that pretend not to exist during the day come to see you at night. And that's exactly what's happening here in this story I'm about to tell you. So grab your favorite tea and settle in and let me tell you another scary story that happened in the Appalachian Mountains, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. This story was sent to me by Anonymous. Hey Savannah, I saw your Appalachia videos and I wanted to send you a story that's been happening to me and my wife. I would like my name to remain anonymous if that's okay. A few years ago, my grandfather passed away, and since I was his only living relative, he left me his house and farmland. My wife and I were living in Texas and relocated here in the Appalachian Mountains to live in my grandfather's house. Ever since we moved in, things have been happening, and it's honestly making me rethink moving out here. We left everything and everyone we knew back in Texas, and it would be extremely hard for us financially to leave here. I didn't visit here much growing up, so I'm not fully aware of all the rules and legends of this area, but I have done some research and we've been following the rules to see if that will help. We moved in about 1.5 years ago, and right off the bat, we would hear very weird things in the cornfield that's directly next to the house. And the weird noises always happen at night. There's no AC in this house because it's very old, so during the summertime, we always sleep with the windows open, or at least did. This is a 2-story house, and my wife and I sleep on the top floor, so we really didn't think too much of it, having the windows open only on the top floor. But it seemed like every night we would wake up hearing a scream coming from the cornfield. The first couple of nights we heard it, I walked outside to the edge of the cornfield and called out to see if anyone needed help. But I never heard anyone reply. My wife and I got so creeped out that we started sleeping with the window shut at night, but that didn't stop the screams and weird things happening. On top of the screams that we would hear at night, as we would get ready to lay down for bed, you could look out into the cornfield and see the tops of the corn stalks moving like something was walking in it. I always figured it was an animal, but now I'm not really sure. During the day, things seem to be fine, other than the occasional pop or creak we can hear coming from upstairs. But again, the house is pretty old, so we just figure it's the house settling. But when night comes, fear starts to set in. Every night pretty much we hear tapping on the side of the house or windows, the screaming out in the cornfield, or random rapid knocks on the front door like something is trying to get in. And all of that is creepy enough, but a few months ago my wife and I had went to dinner, and when we got back my wife headed into the house to get ready for bed. I had to grab something out of the back of the car, and it's pitch black outside, so I had a flashlight digging around in the trunk. I was only back there for a few minutes when I heard my wife's voice say, "Hey babe, come here." I look in the direction that it came from, which just so happened to be the cornfield. I turn my head and look up to the top floor of the house and can see my wife in the window, folding a blanket. I then hear my wife's voice again, say, "Hey babe, I'm over here, come here," which again came from the cornfield. Every hair on my body stood up and I ran inside. I went upstairs and I tell my wife what I just heard, and given that she's heard some creepy things herself, she believed me. Now fast forward to just a couple weeks ago. I'm standing in the kitchen washing dishes after dinner with my wife upstairs making our bed with the fresh sheets we washed that day. I'm drying off a bowl when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I heard creaking behind me like someone was standing there, but I didn't have it in me to turn around. I slowly glance up at the window, and in the reflection I see this black shadow figure standing behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing behind me. And when I turned back around and looked in the reflection again, there was nothing but me standing there. I go upstairs to see if my wife was there or if she had come down to the kitchen, and she's upstairs struggling to put the bedsheet on. I asked her if she was just downstairs, and she looked at me and said no. Why? I told her what I had seen, and she turned pale as a ghost. She sat down and asked me if it smiled at me. I told her no, it didn't do that. It was just standing there. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said the other night when she was in the kitchen, she was looking out the window but heard something creak behind her. And when her eyes focused on the window's reflection, she saw a tall black figure standing there, smiling at her. I asked her why she didn't say anything, and she told me that she didn't want me to worry about it. In newest events a few nights ago, I went to take the trash out behind the house and I heard scratching and banging noises coming from the barn, right behind the house. We keep it locked at all times and we haven't been in there in a while, so I know nothing should be in there. I wasn't about to go check it out, so I just went back inside. That same night, my wife was upstairs laying in bed reading on her Kindle in the dark. Our bed is up against a wall, and directly across from our bed is a wall with a window. The moon was shining bright that night, so it filled the whole room with light, enough for my wife to see as she's sitting in bed. She noticed that the room got a lot darker, then back to bright. So she glances up at the window, but didn't see anything at first. But as she's looking at the window, she said a black figure crossed in front of the window, like it was walking by it. But just as a reminder, our bedroom is on the top floor, which is easily 15 feet up from the ground. We have no idea what she saw, but it terrifies us just to think about it. I'm really not sure what to do. It seems like things just keep happening, but we really don't have the money to pick up and move again. I just pray that things will calm down and that the black shadow will leave, because every time I close my eyes, I see it staring at me in the window. I'm going to need y'all's help in the comments on this one because I really don't know what this could be. There's just so many paranormal things happening to them in this house, like the screaming out in the cornfield, it mimicking the wife's voice, the black shadow figure that both of them seen, and the wife saw it smiling at her. Banging and scratching, it moving in front of the window when the window is 15 feet off the ground. The only thing I could think of to do would be to pray over the land and pray over the house, because honestly, it seems like there's just multiple things here. I don't want to say it's just one specific thing. It sounds like a collection of paranormal things. But regardless, it's absolutely terrifying, and I couldn't imagine packing your life up and going somewhere else and all of these paranormal things happening to you. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them. They do not have to be about the Appalachian Mountains. It can be any paranormal experience you've been through. You can email me at this email right here on the screen or the email in the caption. But as always, thank you so much for being here and watching. It truly means the world to me. And I hope you know how much I love you, because it's a lot. I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
This story comes out of the Roanoke Valley region of Virginia. There was this family from New York who had lived in the city most of their life. They wanted to get away and, live that remote urban life. So they find this beautiful home on 16 acres in this secluded area of the Roanoke Valley in the Appalachian Mountains. And their first day moving in, the father, he notices something weird. The neighbor actually comes not to greet them, not to welcome them to the area, but to warn them. And he says very specifically, at night, make sure you lock your doors and your windows and you close curtains. And he says, very important, there is something out there. And he goes, you mean the people in this area are really like that you have to lock your doors? And he goes, I'm not talking about people. It's something else. But that's all I'm going to say. Now just remember, lock your doors and your windows at night. You'll be all right. So the neighbor leaves. Well, the father kind of just shakes it off and is like, okay, whatever. So they live there for several months, and they really enjoy their new life. Well, this one particular night, the family is sitting in the living room and they have a fire going. That's when the father notices that the son is standing next to the window and he's staring at something very intently. And so he asks the son, what are you staring at? What's out there? And he goes, Father, there's a boy out there. There's this young boy. Can I go and play with him? And the father's like, what are you talking about? There's no boy around here. We live in the woods. There's no one around here. And he's like, no, Father, there's a boy out there. There's a boy out there. And the father's like, you know what? It's time for bed. Go to bed. And he doesn't really think anything of it. Over the next couple of weeks, the son keeps looking out the window at something and telling his father, there's this boy outside. And he keeps drawing pictures of this boy. And he keeps saying, I really want to play with that boy. The father at the time just thinks, this is something to do with him moving and his active imagination. Until one night, the whole family is asleep. When the father wakes to a sound coming from the living room, he gets his wife up and he's like, I think someone's in the house. I think someone's broken in. Go and get the children, make sure they're safe. So he gets up, he goes down the hallway very slowly. And when he gets to the living room and he flips on the light, there's his son on the floor playing with his toys. And the front door is wide open. So he asks the son, what are you doing up? Why are you out of bed? And he goes, Father, I'm playing with the boy. And he goes, what boy? What are you talking about? And he said, the boy, he came inside and he was playing with me. And his father's like, there is no boy here. There's no one around here that is your age. So he tells his son to go to bed. He goes to the front door and he, peers out. There's no one out there. He closes the door. Well, up until this point, he had been keeping this door unlocked because he felt like, we live in the woods. Nothing's going to happen. But that night he starts locking the door. Well, the next couple of weeks, is when they started to hear this banging sound at the front door, like someone was there. And when the father would go and answer the door, there would be no one there. And eventually the father gets so frustrated and angry with whoever's knocking at the door that one night he hears the knocking. He goes to the front door, he opens it, and, he goes out on the porch and he starts screaming, what are you doing at my house? Leave us alone, leave my family alone, quit. And all of a sudden he hears his name being called. And it sounds like a child's voice. And it's telling him to come out into the woods. So this father kind of makes his way back inside, closes the door and locks it. And at this point, he's like, something is definitely going on. So the next day he goes into town and he goes to the local hardware store and he talks with some of the locals. And he starts telling them, I think something's after my family. I think something is trying to scare us. And the locals say, look, we're not trying to be rude, but you need to take your family and get out of here and move back to town if you know what's best for you. And the father takes this as, oh, they're trying to scare me out of town because I'm from the city. So he goes back home and is like, they're not going to scare us. At this point, though, the family is so terrified that they are all sleeping in the same bedroom. And after a couple nights of them sleeping in the bedroom together, the father wakes up and he sees his son standing next to the window and he's staring at something. And he's like, what are you looking at? Like, what is out there? What is out there? And he goes, they're here. They're here, Father. They're here. They're here. And he's like, who's here? And he's like, go back in the bed right now. He goes up to the window, and when he peers out, he sees all of these children standing around the house. And they have these bright, glowing white eyes. So he hurries up, he closes the curtains, and he gets in bed, and he holds his son, and he tells him go to sleep. The next few days, he's very nervous. He's very on edge, but he doesn't know what to do. That night, he goes to bed with the family in the bedroom. He wakes up, and he discovers his family is all gone. He searches the entire home. They are nowhere. The only thing he finds is that the front door is open. So he figures they've taken his family out into the woods. So he runs as fast as he can out into the woods, and he starts screaming, where's my family? Give me back my family. And all of a sudden, he hears some movement coming through the woods. And out of the shadows steps this young boy. And as this boy takes a couple steps closer, he realizes it's his son. And he has these glowing white eyes. And he looks at his father and he says, not yet. And the father takes off running as fast as he can back to the house. He gets in his car, he drives into town and goes to the local pub. And he starts screaming to them, like, they've got my family, they've taken my family, like, you have to help me. And then he runs out of the bar and he leaves. And that was the last time that they ever seen this man or his family ever again.
It's Appalachia spooky story time, y'all, and this story is very different than my others, which is exactly why I chose it, and I want to know what you all think about it. This story comes from one of my followers named Katie. It is pretty terrifying. If you are scared easily and you're watching this at night, I would just save it and wait until the morning. Katie said she grew up in the Midwest, but when she was in 7th grade, her family moved to Western North Carolina. It was her dad, her mom, her sister, and her. Katie said that they moved into this very old farmhouse, and even though it was an older farmhouse, it was quite big. And she said that they had a lot of woods back on the property. There was some field areas where there was some farmland, things like that. But directly from her room, because she was on the 2nd story, she had a window and she could see out into the back of the woods. Just a few feet into the woods, there was an old shed, and she could see the shed from her bedroom window. She said the shed always kind of creeped her out a little bit because it was old, it was back in the woods, and just gave her weird feelings. But she noticed almost every evening her dad would go out into the shed. Sometimes he would only be out there for a few minutes, and then sometimes he would be in this shed for like hours and had no idea what he was doing. She said occasionally she would look out her window and would see lights on in the shed, and so she knew her dad was in there. One morning she looked out her window and there was a big padlock that had been added on to the shed. She thought this was really odd, so she asked her dad about it, and her dad basically told her and her sister that he put the padlock on there to keep people from breaking in because he had some tools that were stolen out of the shed. Then as he was going to leave, he looked back at her and her sister and was like, yeah, I don't ever want you all going near that shed. They're like, why? What's up with the shed? And he was like, don't ask questions. I'm your dad. Just listen to me. I don't want you all near the shed. Here's where things get really odd, though. She said one evening she saw her dad go down to the shed. That was pretty normal. She goes to bed, but in the middle of the night, she wakes up because she hears her mom screaming her dad's name. She wakes up and she's like, Mom, what is going on? And she's like, I can't find your dad. He never came back from the shed. Mom was like, I'm going to go check the shed. You girls just stay in here and I will be right back. Within just a matter of minutes, her mom comes running back through the door and calls an ambulance because she had found her husband slumped over in the shed. While they're waiting on the ambulance, all 3 of them run out to the shed and they're with the dad while he is just like slumped over. He is alive, but he's just not acting right. The ambulance gets there and they say only one person can ride in the ambulance with the dad. So the wife went and she told the daughters just to wait at the house and to take the day off school. Guys, this is so weird. After they leave to go to the hospital, the 2 girls stay and they're like looking in the shed and there's nothing in there. You know how she said she always saw a light on in the shed? There was no electricity in the shed. There was no lanterns, no electricity. It said hanging on the walls, there was like bird feathers and some rabbit feet. And there was like a small work desk with a few carving knives and a notebook. She said when she opened up the notebook, she saw her father's handwriting in there, but then on other pages, the handwriting was completely different. And it was all just like mumbled jargon that she couldn't understand. And then written in the floorboards were like carvings of different symbols. Some of them looked very fresh. Some of them looked super, super old. Her and her sister were super freaked out, felt very unsettled, and just went back into the house. Her dad was eventually discharged from the hospital and was diagnosed with having a stroke. So he came home, he had to walk with a cane, but ultimately was okay. She told her mom about what she found in the shed, so the mom confronted the dad. Apparently the dad just wouldn't talk about it. He just shut down, would not talk about what was in the shed. She said she started to hear her parents fighting a lot, like late at night. The one thing that her dad was always adamant about was that he wanted to continue to go down to the shed, even with his cane, even with like his disability from having the stroke. He was like adamant in the evenings that he still wanted to go out to the shed, and that was the main source of arguments from her parents. Okay, but then it gets even more bizarre. Eventually, months and months and months later, her dad got pneumonia. He was already declining from his stroke. He ended up passing away. After her dad's passing, Katie, her mom, and her sister ended up moving to a smaller home in the city, but she always wondered about that shed, like she couldn't stop thinking about it. Katie and her sister decided to do some research on the home. Turns out this home had had multiple owners over the last 20 years. Like almost every year, the house was put up for sale and bought by someone else. She tried to contact a couple of the previous owners just to like get more information about why they sold the home, anything odd that happened, whatever. And nobody would talk to her. Everyone, as soon as she started asking, just shut down and refused to speak to her. Except for one woman who said that her husband had also suffered a stroke in the shed. She said to this day she has not returned to the property. She does not intend to, but she knows that there is something evil inside of that shed. What do you all think happened here? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you want more spooky stories, then just follow along.